It is my pleasure to introduce to you our afternoon keynote speaker. This is someone I'm pretty sure you're all familiar with. He is an entrepreneur and an investor. He's also co-founder of the educational nonprofit Code.org. He's a graduate of Harvard University. He has worked as Microsoft's group program manager for Internet Explorer. And he has a twin brother with whom he founded iLike. And we think that Hadi is here with us and not Ali. But please welcome Hadi Partovi to the stage.
Thank you very much. My name is Hadi. I planned on starting this talk the way I do almost any talk I do about computer science education with this Code.org video, but I wanted to judge because I think it's unlikely anybody here has not seen that. How many people here have not seen the Code.org video? All right, so I'm going to skip the video part of the intro. So Code.org's vision is about computer science for every student and in every school. And I want to talk about one thing in terms of my topic for this talk and really for this year is that 2013 is the year for computer science. I strongly believe that we're at an inflection point for computer science education. This isn't because of Code.org. I think it's actually part of why the video that we released was so successful. Generally, this is a very good thing, but change also involves change. So there's a lot of sort of moving parts in this inflection point because computer science education, I believe, is becoming a larger movement and a growing thing. There's three things I want to talk about today, or my goals for this presentation. One is to get everybody excited about the future of computer science education. The second is to tell you more about what we're hoping to do at Code.org and what role we're hoping to play. And then lastly, to enlist your help in some of those things. First, I wanted to thank a lot of different people and groups who helped me tremendously in getting Code.org off the ground. This started off as a side hobby for me. Basically, I thought I'd make a cool video and see what happens and help change things. And it's become a completely 60-hour-a-week full-time job now. But there's a whole lot of people, Jan Cooney, Cam Wilson, Alison Durbin, Rick Miller, Chris Stevenson. There's a whole list of there, and I am sure I forgot people off the list, but I wanted to thank them all. I'm very much of a newcomer in this space, and anything I've learned has been thanks to the folks who basically have up to 10 or more years experience doing this, who have basically helped me catch up on what's been going on so I can get into the field. I also wanted to give you a little bit of my background. Instead of the resume, this is how I think of my resume as far as it applies to the field. My most recent 10 years were in the tech industry, basically doing startups, working for Microsoft, and angel investing in startups. But my background has a lot of education in it as well. My father co-founded a university that was dedicated to tech learning, and I've been, at least in college, I spent all 4 years teaching computer science and running the teaching fellows group for our computer science department. So it's something that I actually went through college believing that I was going to become a professor and a teacher, and then at the very, very last minute, got recruited to Microsoft and took a detour. But I say this because my heart has always been in education, so for me, doing Code.org has been about sort of a returning back to my roots. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our opportunity in computer science. This will be, for most of you, stuff you already know, but I'm showing it just so you see the message that I'm delivering, not just to crowds like this, but to a whole lot of other crowds in the business community. So I start telling people about STEM, science, technology, engineering, math. We all know that the US is falling behind math and science. And in fact, when you talk about STEM in education circles, it's something everybody hears about as this problem, we're falling behind China, we suck, blah, blah, blah. But this old story masks a new and much bigger problem that people aren't talking about, and I've been trying to shine a flashlight on it. So there's two graphs I want to compare. The graph on the left shows you students and the AP exam distribution between computer science versus all other math and science AP exams. And then the graph on the right shows the projections for the next 10 years of jobs for computer science and jobs in all other math and sciences. which is a very eye-opening graph, and as soon as you show that to people, they have this sort of moment of like, we're doing something wrong. So the other very important graph, which is not about every child, but does matter for the economy, is the difference between basically jobs minus students, the projections of job growth and the projections of student growth. Now, personally, I don't really believe anything about 10-year projections because they're always different, but I strongly think in this case, the jobs will be more than we think, just as the students grow. So the more students we fill into this field, I think they're going to innovate and create new startups that will then create new jobs. But the difference between jobs and students adds up to $500 billion in salaries. It's 1 million jobs, and these jobs have been shown to have 3 or 4x multipliers in their neighborhood, jobs supporting jobs that pop up because there's such high-paying jobs, which literally mean there's a 4 to 5 million job opportunity in the country, which is roughly half of the hole that our country is in, can be unlocked if we educate kids in these skills. So I think this issue is basically an American dream problem. You know, right now only 5% of schools teach AP computer science. As of last year, there were fewer classes offered than 10 years ago. We know from data that exposure to CS in high school is a fast track to literally the best paying jobs in the country, but it's largely out of reach for most Americans, especially in underserved rural or urban communities. So we have an obligation to fix the American dream. That said, if you just think about jobs, you're missing the picture. This isn't just about tech companies or about jobs. First of all, 67% of software jobs are outside the tech industry. They're in banking and retail, government, entertainment. But more importantly, we need all of our children prepared for the 21st century. We collected a whole lot of quotes from luminary world leaders as part of the Code.org launch, but this is my favorite from the president of the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center, basically saying that learning computer science is as important as learning anatomy when it comes to medical research or clinical care, which is a very, very strong statement. In fact, that's what he said, but when we put it on our website, I added the word almost to make it more credible, saying it's almost as important as anatomy. But the words out of his mouth actually were that it's as important. And this is because if you think 10, 20 years down the future, all the medical devices that we're going to be using for measuring our diseases, even healing our diseases, diagnosing them, are all going to be technology-based. And that's true whether you look at medicine, at agriculture, transportation, et cetera. So I tried to change the discussion by both putting forth these graphs and making this video, starring a bunch of cool people. And one interesting person who participated in the video, which most people don't know, is Leslie Chilcott. She was a producer for An Inconvenient Truth. And the reason I picked her as a director is, for me, that movie basically was sort of a defining movie that changed sort of the name of the game with the climate crisis and the global climate change discussion. Whether you believe in it or not, or whatever your opinion is, it moved it into the discussion in a way that it hadn't been really before. We also recruited quotes of support from dozens and dozens of leaders, whether it's business leaders, political leaders, education leaders, doctors, lawyers. I have a few of these to share. This one you've probably already seen because a lot of people have borrowed it from our video and put it on their own websites too, which is great. But if you look at pretty much any technology leader from the tech industry, they're willing to go on the record saying, we need more of our students to learn this. This is one of my favorite quotes from Mark Zuckerberg saying, in 15 years, we'll be teaching computer programming just like we teach reading and writing, and we'll be looking back wondering why we didn't do it any sooner. But we didn't just get quotes from business leaders, we also got people like Stephen Hawking saying, whether you want to uncover the secrets of the universe or just get a job, this is something you need to learn. And my favorite quote in terms of describing the breadth of people who care about this, Snoop Dogg, support the American dream, make coding available to everyone. And actually, since we got this quote from him, he's no longer even Snoop Dogg, now he's Snoop Lion. But regardless, my point with this is there's a lot of people coming out of the woodwork to support this issue, which a year ago, this was a very small issue, not something that people, not something that Snoop Dogs of the world were aware of. So I think we've managed to basically get this issue above the fray and above the noise of the usual STEM discussion to get its own discussion of its own, which I think it really merits. A lot of people have asked what has been sort of the reaction to the video, how do people react? I wanted to share some awesome stats in terms of just how the video did. We had over 20 million views on YouTube and Facebook. For me, one comparison I made is that that's actually more than the number of times An Inconvenient Truth got seen in the theaters, which is amazing. And we were distributed via 500,000 teachers to play in their classrooms and shared all over the world. But for me, one of the most interesting things is we were on YouTube as the #1 video of the day, and that's actually a screenshot of YouTube's homepage with the code.org video as #1, ahead of Jennifer Lawrence the week after the Oscars. So, which is a huge, huge accomplishment for So, by the way, that's not an accomplishment for me, it's an accomplishment for CS education, to basically get that issue to be so important. Some of the more really important results, more than 3.5 million students tried learning online with the little tutorials we had listed on our website, and many of the websites that we link to still tell us that 4 months later, we're still their #1 referrer for traffic, which is mind-boggling. Really means they were not getting very much traffic otherwise. But we have more than 730,000 signed petitions with zip codes and growing. By comparison, this is almost 4 times larger than the most popular and fastest growing ever White House petition, which is for gun control. That has just under 200,000 signatures. So this is a big, big number in terms of just proving our support when we want to use that for advocacy and political conversations. We've had teachers and principals from over 12,000 schools reach out to us basically asking for help setting up coding classes or clubs or computer science classes. We've had more than 25,000 software engineers say, I'm willing to help. And for the teachers and the volunteers, we broke down the data. Where do you live? How much are you willing to help? What languages do you know? Or what kind of class would you like to set up? And so on. And then for this crowd, something that's really, really important, and we don't have data that's broad, we have anecdotal data, but we've heard from many, many examples from CS teachers who used our video basically to play it for all the students in the high school and then saw their enrollment numbers triple or quadruple even for next year. And I mention this because I did a number of surveys of CS teachers, some anecdotal, some actually with the College Board to ask how can we increase CS enrollment. And the #1 response from the College Board survey from CS teachers was better marketing materials. And I had been hoping that our video would be great marketing material, but we now know that it is. So it delivered on what the hope was. Please, please show it to students, not just your own students, but to the other students in your schools to recruit to grow your classes. For the teachers I've known who've done it, I have a cousin of mine who's a math teacher. She went to her school assembly without even having permission. She just kind of decided, there's a blank moment and people were wondering what's going on, so she just went up to the front of the stage and said, hey everybody, I'm going to show you this video. And then, literally in the next week, their enrollment for CS went from 15 people to something like 38 people. And now she has some enemies at the school because a bunch of other teachers lost their sections and a bunch of other stuff. But either way, it was a fantastic sort of reaction. We've had a number of outpourings of stories and emails from students saying they basically changed, their majors because of this, or they've changed courses because of this. From parents saying, talking about whether their daughters or their sons or so on changed this. The first quote from the parent is one of my favorites. My 16-year daughter said this was cool, and it's the first time she's ever called education cool. From teachers, this was from my cousin who basically said she played the video. Not only she got a standing ovation, but the kids said they'd already seen it. And then from software engineers, this is also a hilarious quote. This thing is the best thing since programming. But then there's another sort of area of outpouring of emails, which was from the CS community, which was, you can read these yourselves, which are basically, why did you say code instead of computer science? What is your plan for equity within the school and universal access? And how do we deal with coherency and professional development? How do we steer people towards CS and not things like HTML and PowerPoint? And I put this up a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but I actually wanted to address some of these questions because if any people here in the room have those questions, they're completely reasonable questions. One thing, if any of you who have heard from me before would know, I've said the only reason I chose the name code.org instead of computerscience.org is simply because it's 4 letters versus 18 or whatever. And in fact, if computer science was a four-letter word, that's what we would have used. It was purely a marketing choice, not a steering kids towards one thing versus the other. But I also firmly believe that for the layperson, they have no idea what the difference between coding versus computer science versus computational thinking versus software engineering. That's all one big black box of scary stuff. They don't know what it is, like they wish they knew and like they're scared of. So really, only folks in this room even know what the difference is or care. And for most other people, just bringing them and introducing them to any part of it and making it seem whether it's cool or fun or approachable is the real goal. So, and we chose code.org basically because it's a short name. We actually thought about getting Learn Computer Science and Learn CS, and all those domain names, it just felt like they wouldn't be sort of as strong of a sort of consumer call to action. But that said, I'm firmly a believer in, the reason I'm doing this is because of the equality of access, the sort of shortage of underrepresented groups within the CS community. In my state of Washington, there's less than 10 black kids a year who take computer science at the AP level, which is just, I found that out and I was like, oh my God, that's horrible. Then I realized that we're like just as bad as every other state. We're not behind other states. And those types of issues are very, very near and dear to my heart, whether it's among underrepresented groups, whether it's among girls. So I may look or seem to sort of the external person who doesn't know me as somebody who's doing this to create jobs for the tech industry, but that for me hasn't been my goal. For me, my goal has been just, why is it that we teach kids that red blood cells carry oxygen and not what an if-then statement is? It just seems like something we should do. And for me, stuff like this is basically the most important type of comments and feedback we've gotten from people, is knowing that we can, by educating them and giving them just a glimmer of what it's like to study computer science and coding, hopefully change the arc of the lives of a number of kids and get them into a field that they wouldn't have gotten to otherwise. So having talked a little bit about our video and the project, there's a huge question people regularly ask me, which is, what's next for code.org? You got all this attention, what are you going to do? One thing I should say, first of all, is I didn't expect to have gotten quite so much attention, so had I known, I would have probably planned an immediate follow-up for 20 million views. We didn't quite expect quite so much. But over the last 4 or 5 months, one thing we've pulled together basically is a plan for a public-private partnership built on years of foundation built by partner organizations and to capitalize on our consumer momentum. So I've spent a lot of time with the College Board, with the ACM, with NC-WIT, with the NSF, with the CSTA, and also with Computing in the Core, which is now, as you may have heard, become, in some ways, merged with Code.org, or has become a sister organization to Code.org to sort of further computer science education. We have 3 levels of goals: short-term, medium, and long-term. The short-term goal is to get computer science into more classrooms, change the rules in the easy states, and to inspire students. The medium-term goal is to get into every school, not just some more schools, and to get every state to recognize computer science as a real part of STEM. And then the long-term goal is that every student gets exposed at some level. It doesn't necessarily need to be a 4 days a week, full-year class, but at least some level of exposure for every student, and that computer science is part of what you'd call the core. And this isn't a sort of easy thing to do. The long-term goal will take a decade. Over the next decade, basically, we have projects or goals in 3 different areas of work. The hardest work is what I call the educate part. It's called educate because it rhymes with the other 2, but which is basically getting CS into the schools. So this means for us to work with supportive districts to provide professional development, mentorship, and policy support to help set up and sustain computer science classes. We want to basically pick somewhere between 1 and 3 demo cities to work with and to partner with NSF-funded basically programs that are already working in districts to basically help set up computer science. There's going to be some areas where we develop curriculum modules and support modules in ways that can help all teachers and basically building on work that other people are doing to basically grow CS in schools. The second bucket of work for us is advocacy, to change the rules, to get all 50 states to count computer science towards graduation, and to build a coalition of people to basically change policy in the states. I think this has been work that a lot of people have tried, but our hope is to bring a lot more muscle to the conversation and to bring a lot of more grassroots support to the conversation. And for that work, we're doing that with Computing in the Core and partnering with the CSTA. And then the last area for us, which is sort of where I started is basically the celebrate areas to inspire youth and their parents to learn and to basically use social media, celebrities, videos, events to basically help grow recognition for computer science and move it sort of higher and higher up in terms of both people's awareness of it being important, but also making it cooler and trying to break down some of the cultural stereotypes that make it harder, especially for women and minorities, to feel like they belong in this space. I'm going to give a little bit more detail about each of those three areas. On the first part, which is getting CS into schools, Pat Youngpert, which many of you must know, has joined Code.org as our Director of Education. His immediate job, number one, is to help us pick a short list of demo cities where we're basically going to work to help establish programs to prepare math and science and CTE teachers to teach CS next year. And in this work, we want to work with NSF-funded efforts, whether they're the CS Principles Program for sure, or ECS, NIMSY, and a host of other NSF-funded partners. We're still very early at this. We only hired Pat, I think, 3 weeks ago. So it's not like, he hasn't had very much time on the job yet. But we want to gain experience and traction. We're in this for the long run, and we want to learn what it takes to succeed and fail at the scope of a few cities before trying to expand to broader throughout the country. We're going to do some work in the curriculum space. We're developing our own resource modules, and I want to say a little bit about that. First of all, anything we build that involves software, our goals are to make it 100% free, 100% open source, web-based, and zero install, meaning you don't need to install something on it. Thank you. The second is we want to focus not on reinventing the wheel, but on areas that aren't really well served yet. One area which I'm really excited about, which Pat's working on, is basically video lectures to teach the non-programming parts of CS principles. A lot of CS teachers don't know exactly how to teach those things, and they don't have ready-to-go curriculum that they can reuse. And we have access to some awesome, awesome people. Actually, it's not that we have access. The world has awesome people to deliver those lectures. We'll just take a camera out to them and have them deliver those lectures. So, for example, imagine having either Vince Cerf or Mark Andreessen lecturing on how does the internet work, rather than people coming up with it. One of the lectures that we already have just recorded is one of the co-founders of the Xbox taking it apart to show the insides and the architecture of an Xbox. And my hope with this is to not just get sort of famous tech people, but also get sort of videos that showcase people both in the tech industry or in research or in healthcare, whether they're older or younger or male or female, just to have sort of a variety of faces that a student may see as part of sort of who does computer science, so that it's not always white men, or at least white, which is, if you're an African American or a Latina in a classroom, all the sort of famous people in tech seem to be white, and I want to basically get more of a sort of a gender and race diversity there. We also, besides the instructional content, want to make short inspirational content, and I'll show you an example of that at the end of the talk. And then lastly, we want to make web-based self-guided curriculum for very early introductory programming where there's less sort of self-guided content in that space. But either way, anything we build are going to be free tools that can be used by any student or by any teacher. On the advocacy front, our biggest effort is changing the policy state by state. And anybody here who does advocacy, we want to help your efforts or bring sort of, I guess, more support to them. In 41 out of 50 states, computer science doesn't even count towards high school graduation requirements. By comparison, in China, it's required to graduate. So every single student in China must learn computer science to graduate. In our states, even if you study it, it doesn't count. It's just a complete diametrically opposite situation. And we already have data that shows that in states that recognize computer science, enrollment is 50% higher. So the map that you see there is actually from the 2009 Running on Empty report. So this is now today's map, which is 4 years later, and we just managed to flip the state of Washington this past year. So I'll just go back so you can compare the maps. So it was 41 states, now 36 states. So we're hoping to get at least 5 states within the next year to then get us down to 30 states that basically are still in the count in the group that don't count. So our approach towards advocacy is we can't do it all. We're not going to have the budget to hire 50 different lobbying organizations. Instead, we want to help local existing advocacy efforts We'll provide marketing material and research. We'll provide grassroots support using our large database of consumers and parents and so on within every state. And we're building a coalition between the tech industry and ed reform groups to basically change these rules. So we expect this to be a collaborative effort between Code.org, the CSTA, and the College Board, who are putting, I think, the most effort into this right now, and numerous tech companies and education reform organizations, Microsoft, Oracle, Google, many others, are going to be basically helping with sort of feet on the ground to do this. To give some examples of recent success we've had in advocacy in Washington State, we helped pass a law to basically recognize computer science with nearly unanimous support. And Washington State's legislature is roughly as screwed up as the federal legislature in terms of having a split House and Senate. And we got a 95-3 vote in a Democratic House and a 45-1 vote in a Republican-controlled Senate, which is somewhat unheard of. So the other recent success was in the US House of Representatives. The Computer Science Education Act was finally introduced a few weeks ago by a bipartisan group of sponsors, and this is something that Cameron and Della from the Computing in the Core group have been working on for years, but it was a great success to basically get the bipartisan sponsorship there. We've also had recent success with the NCAA. In 2005, the NCAA would proactively reject computer science for academic credit. Today, the NCAA will give academic credit to a rigorous CS class if the school itself counts it for math and science credit. And so if you teach CS in any of these states, you should be able to get it to count. And the way the NCAA's rules are, if it's an AP CS class, they don't check anything more. If it's AP CS and your school counts it, then they'll treat it for academic credit. If it's not an AP CS class, they'll double check to make sure it's not an HTML and keyboarding class or a PowerPoint or so on class. So they now understand the difference between those two, and originally they said, well, they understood it before. I don't want to insult the NCAA. They used to say, this is a mess, there's no coherence, let's just not count any of it. Now they're differentiating and spending the time. The challenge is they won't give credit if the state and the school itself doesn't give it credit, but that means our efforts to change the state rules should over time change the situation again. So lastly, I want to talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing in the celebrating and inspirational side of things. And this is something that isn't just something we want to do. We want to basically recruit as many people around us to do this. And this is basically to help inspire America to be great. I very much think that we struck a chord with an audience who really wants this. The reason the Code.org video went viral was partly because it was a well-done video. It's partly because there were celebrities in it, but there's been lots of videos that are well done with celebrities. It's much more because it's a topic that struck a chord with an audience. And whether you're red or blue or independent or whatever, I personally think Americans are very united in one thought, which is we want America to suck less. So, but joking aside, I actually very much think that's true. I think America just feels down in the dumps and wants a story for what can we do as a country to fix the economy, fix the inequality between the 1% and the 99%. All that stuff is just bad news, and our leaders don't provide any sort of out for how we get out of that bad news. So somebody needs to provide an out, and Americans want a story they can believe in. So our marketing goal is to inspire the entire population of the country. The old view is that computer science is for the geniuses who are portrayed by the media as being white, male, young. The new news is that every American can learn the basics to this field that can unlock the potential of the American dream. And this is a big deal because the American dream is no longer to go out west and build a log cabin. The American dream is to be the next founder of the next Instagram or Tumblr. And building a log cabin is something that everybody in their mind can envision what it would take. You'd go west and chop trees and then tie them together. But building the next Instagram or Tumblr, most Americans have no idea where they'd want to start doing that. And a lot of Americans now have smartphones. They've had the experience of, wouldn't it be cool if there was an app that did blah, blah, blah? And then they're like, well, I don't know how I would create that. And then that sort of entrepreneurial spirit dies on the vine. And it goes away. But I think this is very much a story that can resonate. I have a picture to go along with the Every American Can Learn the Basics. You can't quite tell what that is, but that is me teaching the House Majority Leader Eric Cantor how to code. And I'm not trying to put him down, but I literally have a goal of teaching people who you would not expect to learn how to code, at least to write 1 or 2 lines of code, to basically show that this isn't just for sort of who you'd think it is. So I have a particular marketing goal around this and a particular campaign that I want to enlist your help on this. And this is a very audacious marketing goal, and it's around CS Education Week this year, which is December 8th through 13th of 2013. Obviously, it's already on your calendars as a very important week. So my goal for CS Education Week is to give an hour of code for every student in America. And it's a huge, huge, audacious goal to try to do that because there's 55 million students in the country. And there's a question of, well, how do we recruit that? How do we make that happen? So our goal is to recruit 100,000 teachers to offer their students an hour of code. Now, what does an hour of code mean? First of all, I didn't come up with that name, Cameron Wilson did. So those of you who think that code isn't the same as computer science can direct your ire at him. But what it means is introductory computer science and programming, and HTML doesn't count, enough to give students a taste and to demystify computer science, ideally enough of a taste that somebody can build something that they can show to somebody else. If you're a CS teacher, which means everybody in this audience, you can come up with what 1 hour of code would mean. If you're not a CS teacher, we'll basically curate curriculum options for all grades that are web-based or even smartphone-friendly or even unplugged to deal with the logistics of most schools don't have enough computers. And then we're going to recruit sponsors, prizes, rewards for participating schools or for participating teachers and students. And I've been pitching this idea for maybe 2.5 weeks, and I've never pitched anything that has met with so much ridiculous levels of support. Just to give you examples of the types of support this idea gets, because this idea came from like 5 or 6 different people saying different things and sort of gelled together as this hour of code, but we're now at the point where, as an example, the Boys and Girls Club of the US wants to have every single Boys and Girls Club do an hour of code. I met with the president of the NCAA. He wants to ask every single coach to give every single NCAA athlete an hour of code, which is mind-blowing. Google has agreed to link to an hour of code or to CS Ed Week from their google.com homepage, which is, again, a very, very big deal. There's numerous politicians who are interested in basically kicking off CS Ed Week at a local school if we can get that local school to host an hour of code. And the White House itself is interested in participating. Both Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg are interested in basically kicking off an hour of code at their schools, at local schools near wherever they are. It's a campaign where we can basically recruit leaders from technology, from business, celebrities, politicians to basically kick off computer science events at every school, not just at the schools that have computer science teachers. So it's a huge deal, and this group here is where basically it has to start. So if you're in this room, we really want you to think of this as something you do during Computer Science Education Week. So if you're willing to do that, think about who you can recruit to help, because obviously your computer science class is already learning computer science, but the question is, can you recruit other teachers in your school and give them something that they can give to their students for 1 hour? If you're interested, go to csedweek.org or hourofcode.org and give us your email address, and we'll give you ideas and sort of send you information about it. And our goal at code.org isn't to do everything about this, but we want to provide enough structure to allow other people to organize creative events. This whole hour of code sort of name is basically a bucket that a lot of things can fit into. I just met with Mitch Resnick and Karen Brennan from Scratch, and they're talking about making little 1-hour Scratch tutorials that are basically hour-long and result in some cool outcome that you can share on the internet and whatnot. I think if we basically collectively put our minds to this CS Ed Week, we can get literally a huge number of people doing this. So for me, success looks like getting 10,000 schools, 100,000 teachers, and 10 million students and parents basically writing computer science programs for 1 week. If we get to even 1,000 schools, it'll be enough to permanently tip the scales on national awareness. But I personally think 10 million students is totally within reach. The last video we did had 3.5 million students visiting our page for learning. So this is roughly 3 times that. It should be doable. In fact, getting back to that vision of an hour of code for every student, once we start talking about it, I literally think we can start talking about it as an hour of code for every American. And that's ridiculous, which is why I'm going to add the little American flag next to it. But I say this because I've been pitching this to sort of tech CEOs saying, hey, can your company support this initiative at schools? And they've said, well, we should do this for all of our employees. I've had a friend of mine saying, who's in the education space saying, you should take this to prisons and have inmates learn computer science. Why not? So it's, at first I sort of was kind of shocking, but it's like, yeah, really, why not? I really think this is a message that basically can help get all of America learning computer science, which will help this field tremendously. So if there's one thing you walk away with, please go to the CS Ed Week website and sign up to help in your local school with an hour of code. There's 18.8 weeks left until CS Ed Week. We have a lot to plan and organize between now and then, but I want everybody here to help. I want to close with a short story. This is a story of Makinde Adeagbo. You may have remembered him from a brief segment in the Code.org video. Makinde is a friend of mine. He used to work for me briefly as a summer intern, but he came to America from Nigeria when he was in 3rd grade, and grew up like any other kid, but was lucky enough to go to a magnet school that offered computer science. He grew up in Kentucky, not sort of the place you'd expect there to be lots of computer science schools, but he learned computer science and then ended up at Facebook, and by 26, he's basically already retired. There's 2 interesting things about Makinde. One thing is, first of all, that when he graduated, he was one of 4 kids in Kentucky to take APCS who were also African American, and last year there were 5. So over 10 years, there's been no change in basically the status of computer science for African Americans in Kentucky. But the other interesting thing is what did he go to do next is he went to build schools in Africa, because he came from Africa. And I have this great clip of him from when we did the Code.org interview sessions to ask him about like his building schools in Africa thing, which I asked him was like, you went to Africa, you did some like heavy labor, getting away from the computer and the basement or whatever, and like going out and building things. And he basically said, no, that's not what he did. And I'm going to play this short video of him.
After I left Facebook last year, I was sort of searching for the next opportunity and wanted to maybe give back a little bit or do something different, right? So I, through a job board and talking to some people, found an opportunity to go work in Nairobi. So the company was Bridge International Academies. What they do is they build primary schools in slums, right now in Nairobi, but looking to expand to Kenya and more of East Africa after that. And you probably think, why do you need a software engineer there? So there are a number of things. So one is, where do you build the school? So you know there's a slum, and can that slum support the school? So you answer that question by saying, okay, well, how many households are there? How many children are in those households? Well, it turns out without great census data, that's not an easy question to answer. So what they actually do is they take satellite imagery and use software to count the rooftops. Even something as simple as, hey, we want to buy this plot of land, and we have certain parameters that make it a good plot. How do we find out if this plot of land fits? You can also just write software for a simple cell phone and walk around the perimeter of the plot and have the cell phone pick up GPS data as you're walking, right? So you can use technology to solve these problems that you wouldn't think it applies to in sort of novel and simple ways.
So I love this story because this is a kid who basically would not have had a retirement at age 26, and he's literally using computer science to build schools in places that don't have schools, which is an amazing sort of example of how this field given to people more broadly beyond who you think computer science is for can help change the world. This is also one of many sort of inspirational videos we'll hopefully basically produce as a library that teachers can use in classrooms, so it's beyond instructional stuff as inspirational videos as well. So
yeah, so after I left...
Excuse me. So I'm done with slides. You have my email address there. Please visit code.org to see either our videos or infographics or one-sheets. And before we break for questions, please go to csedweek.com and sign up there. It's mobile friendly, so you can do it from your smartphones here. But other than that, thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer questions.
What are other things teachers can do beyond business week?
So the question is, what can teachers do to help beyond CS Ed Week? So our goals with CS Ed Week really is to recruit people beyond the teachers in this classroom, teachers who basically are already into computer science education. Among the things they can do is helping with policy and advocacy in their local states. And one of the things we haven't, as Code.org or even Computing in the Core, we haven't been as much on the offensive on the sort of state policy issue until this year. It's been a little bit either defensive or supporting other efforts that are there. But Cameron's going to be on this sort of goal of picking on the order of 15 states where we take aggressive positions to change policy in those states. And when we do that, we're going to want help of basically effectively advocates on the ground who can be sort of the local leaders, because Cameron's not going to be in 15 states, and we won't have staff in 15 states, but we'll want people who are going to be basically advocates within those states. So that's probably the biggest area. Helping recruit other teachers to become CS teachers is also an important thing. So for us, getting CS into more schools is about basically convincing an existing math teacher, science teacher, CTE teacher to take a 6 to 8 week workshop so they can offer a computer science class. And we'll provide the programs and the stipends, but at the end of the day, we also need to have the teacher demand. So I think those are two ways you can help. But the CS Ed Week is, I'd say, the first one of them. So, yep.
Every student takes math almost every school year, maybe a year or two of high school. Have you thought about trying to convince the math teacher that computer programming should be part and parcel of the mathematics curriculum?
That's a great question. The question is, have we tried convincing math teachers to make computer science part and parcel of the every year mathematics curriculum? So I haven't personally begun this dialogue directly with the math teacher, but I have two ways I think about it. One is, I've been asked many times, if computer science is coming in, something has to go, what's going to go, because that's, I think, a typical way schools react to new things. If you're going to add something, something has to go. And I don't usually answer with this, but what's in the back of my mind as something that has to go is the graphing calculator. And the graphing calculator is something that wasn't even around when I was taking math, or if it was around, it wasn't in my school. But right now, from 8th grade and up, every single student, every single year of math must use a Texas Instrument graphing calculator. It's like practically legislated because it's required to use this calculator on the SAT, so that's the one that everybody buys. It's literally the only piece of technology that hasn't dropped in price in 20 years because it's legislated to be required to be bought. And it's also a very, very vocational skill that if you learn how to use it, only applies to one job in the entire world, which is math teacher. So there's nobody else who uses a graphing calculator. There's only one market for it. So I would love to get us to a world where the same exact concepts that you teach with a graphing calculator could be taught using software, like how to make a graph, how to solve equations, variables, all these other things. Now, how do we get there? There's multiple ways I think about it, but the work that Emmanuel is doing in Bootstrap is a perfect example of this, basically using computer, hi Emmanuel, using basically computer programming concepts to teach things like functions and variables, or to teach geometry. And I think that's actually something we could do not only in math, but in physics, biology, and chemistry. So this is an area where we're not proactively, like today, starting to do stuff in that, but I've had conversations with people who are basically working on the Common Core rollout, whether in math or English, or in the future NGSS, Next Gen Science Standards rollout. Those rollouts, as I'm sure you know, are kind of bumpy, and it's unclear how well they'll go, but one of the things those groups want is basically curriculum modules that help map to the Common Core and help deliver the new standards. And if we develop things that basically deliver those Common Core standards and layer on some levels of computer programming and computer science, I think we can basically succeed at doing that. That for sure is the way to get every single kid exposed. I don't think it's right for every single kid to take a full year APCS class, or at least it'll be much harder to do that than to get every 8th grader to take 4 weeks of CS as part of math, or however much they get of graphing calculators. It will for sure address gender equity. On the gender equity question, there's a small number of schools in the country that requires CS for every student. So Stuyvesant High School in New York is an example. And And Thomas Jefferson? Yeah, so, and in those schools, I don't know about Thomas Jefferson's stats, but I asked basically the teacher at Stuyvesant to basically give me anonymized stats on their students' AP results, and the girls performed, I think, 2 percentage points differently than the guys. It's very clear that sort of, not just, obviously, they all take it because it's required, but achievement levels are basically indistinguishable once you require it and you sort of take out the sort of cultural aspect. Question over there?
I think another stigma with computer science is that it belongs to the high school and the university college level. In any of your follow-up materials or future videos, have you thought about how to make it more accessible to younger students and the teachers of those younger students, that you can do it at the elementary level and it's not just for the older kids? Because if you look at people like Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg, they had tremendous early exposure early in their lives to get where they are.
Sure. If anybody didn't hear the question, she was asking how do we bring computer science to younger kids and have we thought about exposing it to younger kids. Yeah, that was for sure part of our goal. In fact, in our video we have a number of scenes of students that are literally fifth graders. We actually went to an elementary school in Seattle in a very urban, low-income district where fifth graders are learning computer science. And there's a scene of that in the video. It obviously isn't the only thing that shows up. And we had ideas of how to showcase it to actually say, you know, basically that in a low-income district, fifth graders are learning this, and it's not sort of just the special students, it's every kid in fifth grade. And to compare that with people like Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg saying I started when I was 10 or when I was 11 or so on, to help communicate that it's not just because those guys were special geniuses, it's just because their parents gave them access. So that's certainly near and dear to our heart. There's actually a lady named Katie Apone here who basically set up actually that elementary school in Seattle that has now joined Code.org. Her previous organization was going through and setting up CS at elementary schools and middle schools. And one thing I'd mentioned earlier in terms of having instructional videos, and we want our lecturers to be all ages and all genders, I want to have some of the lectures, or the video lectures we do, be given by much, much younger kids than, for example, a Bill Gates or a Mark Zuckerberg. So I strongly think my own 4-year-old daughter is using Lightbot, and you know, she doesn't know that she's even doing computer science. She just thinks she's playing an iPad game, and there's no reason that only she should have it and not most kids.
I might offer a use for the teachers that have been involved in advocacy before is to figure out with them what strategy state by state would be most effective, because in some states, the state board is the group that gets to set these kinds of policies, and going to the legislature opens a whole Pandora's box of people that have no qualifications who would just love to legislate everything.
Yes, Cameron is smiling because I think he agrees with you strongly. The hardest thing about changing the state-by-state issue is that every state is completely different, and we don't know exactly how they're all different. What we've started is we've created 50 different documents, one for each state, to get sort of a lay of the land of, in this state, how does it work, what's different, what are the ways to achieve change. And we've actually asked the CSTA leadership cohort to basically help us fill in those documents. But one thing that might be possible is basically opening up those documents so people in this room can also contribute them as well. There's literally 50 different documents, one for each state, to basically come up with, in this state, this is the guy you should talk to, and this is your opponent, and this is the group that is the most influential, and it's, there's different laws and different people in each one.
Well, there are teachers groups that have been involved in advocacy for a long time, and figuring who the people in those groups.
Yep, exactly. Who the supporters are, both among the existing teacher groups and among the tech industry and the business community. I think we for sure, I think I said this on my side, we can't do the state-by-state advocacy ourselves. What we mainly want to do is help the existing groups and bring them more juice, whether it's videos that they couldn't have afforded to produce, but that can be used in every state, or, you know, videos, marketing material, tech leaders, grassroots supporters, celebrities who are going to sort of give a concert in the state and ask people. I mean, there's things that are sort of not in the normal tool chest of an advocate. Those are the things we want to be able to help with. What we can't do is knowing in this state what are the specific levers and so on. And that's the part that we actually want sort of local people to help with.
Hi, as a teacher advocate, as many of you in this room are, for the hour of code, I would like my pledge to be a little bit different. I'd like to pledge to say, well, if we actually get 100,000 teachers, I don't want them to go away after an hour. I want to keep them so that CSTA next year can be 100,000 people instead of 200. And so what I would like to pledge is, or have the ability to do, is if someone does that hour of code and is new to it, that they can say, oh, you can ask, are you interested in teaching computer science a little bit more? And if they say yes, then up will pop a picture of me, and you can say, talk to this guy. So I would like to talk to them about it, and I think other people in the room would like to as well, and if that can be built in, I think that would really help expand.
Yeah, for sure we think, thank you. For sure we think of, the reason why this hour of code thing popped up is there had been two questions on my mind for the last 4 months. One was, is it possible to do anything that's even bigger than we just did with that video, which I didn't expect to be that big, but that exploded. Can we do that again? And then secondly, can we do it with some follow-through as to what happens next that has, establishes more teachers in schools? And the beauty of the hour of code is whether with the student or with the teacher, there's that kind of a follow-up. For the teacher, wasn't that hour great? Wouldn't you like to think about offering a full class? And for the student, wasn't that hour great? Wouldn't you like to take a full class? And if one isn't offered at your school, here's some places you can try to find one, and so on. So the benefit of giving people not just a video, but actual exposure is it gives them a real taste of exactly what it's like. And anybody who's done computer programming, that after you've done an hour, you'll be like, there's one little thing I wanted to add to that thing I built, and it didn't quite work the way I wanted, and it's usually your computer is taken away from you because you wanted to fix something. And if you're limited to an hour, I bet there's going to be a lot of people who basically want to do the follow-on. But that is absolutely how we think about it. And you back there.
Now, I want to add something slightly sideways to this. I've done a lot of coding and teach programming and all that, and I agree with all of that. But we also teach like hardware, software, networking, and basically we want them to have the background to what they're programming on. And my biggest problem is that all the books we buy, a lot of which are first-year college books, have the most appalling questions at the back. And those are the yes, no, true, false, or fill in the missing words. There's nothing that requires logic. Now, I did the A+, and basically a lot of the questions had scenarios where you had to troubleshoot. And I try and invent those questions for my test. But I've limited resources because there's no books. If you go to biology and science, there's thousands of test banks. So I wondered if you could think about or look into producing test bank type questions that we can use, because I think developing logic starts before programming in the sort of scenarios that happen in the real world. And that's what I'd like to see more of.
All right, well, that's great feedback for Pat, whose general job is to... His first goal is creating video lectures for some of those topics, but he may look at assessments and test banks afterwards. I mean, what we really don't want to do is reinventing the wheel in the space of curriculum. We'd rather do creating modules that help in an area that doesn't exist, or making something free that you had to pay for, or making something not require an installation that required installation before, or so on. But if that's a common need, we'll hopefully look into it.
You mentioned that 4 students in your state of Washington had taken, 4 African American students had taken the AP Computer Science exam. In California, that number is 45 African American students in the year of 2012 with Silicon Valley in our backyard. And the population of the U.S. is going to be majority minority by the year 2040. So I'm wondering if you're doing anything specific to target underrepresented students of color through these efforts.
Yeah, the underrepresentation is crazy. I just recently saw a speech by Cory Booker where he said basically black and brown kids already outnumber white kids. So basically just add 20 years, and the ridiculous underrepresentation means unless we fix that issue, we're actually going to be shrinking the CS literacy of the population just by adding time. So we have to change that. And it's bad that way in pretty much every single state. In the entire country, we produce roughly 2,000 CS graduates at the college level among people of color, which is just, 2,000 is a very, very small number if you think of that as, in the future, that's going to be the majority of all of the population. So in terms of the best ways we think of it for addressing it are, first of all, introducing it into urban schools or schools that basically have more racial diversity. So, there's already studies that have come out that show that CS is more popular or more established in suburban schools rather than in urban and rural schools. Simply making it available in more schools will help. Continued marketing and other sort of recruitment methods to make it more accessible to the underrepresented groups will help. The new CS Principles course, I think, has been partly designed with an eye towards that. And for sure, the video we made and any marketing we do will look towards an eye towards underrepresented groups. I mean, it's not an accident that that the video wasn't only white men. There was basically people of multiple colors and genders in our video, and it was very hard to find a famous African-American computer scientist. There aren't any, or if there are, they at least aren't at the heads of any consumer recognizable company. But we still want to make basically somebody watching the video, as students who saw our video, Chris Bosch is actually the guy who stands out more than anybody else in the Code.org video. If you showed it in your classroom, that's the moment that the kids stand up and start high-fiving each other, is when Chris Bosch comes on the stage. And he's already agreed to become more of a spokesperson for this issue, so we're going to recruit him more, which I'm sure will help. And then lastly, bringing it in at younger ages I think will help as well, because by high school is when we lose a lot of those kids. So.
I already said this in tax session. You said I shouldn't say it to you. So, I teach in a very rural area. I serve 7 towns, and we're losing families to leave for jobs and such. So we're losing money in our budget. So when teachers leave, they don't replace them. So because of the shrinking population and the fewer teachers, we're often asked to consolidate, or you can drop courses from our program of studies. For the last 5 years, we're trying to increase the programming in our school, but I'm told that's not our need right now. This year, when I went in to pitch my program of study, I was able to bring the data from Code.org with me and show the video. I was able to add 2 new programming classes on top of my current program of studies.
Great. Thank you. That's fantastic. Yeah, I've been asked many times, how do we make sure CS, if you put CS in a school, how do you make sure it doesn't get cut? The number one way is get a lot of students to sign up. And once there's a lot of students and parents interested, it's going to be incredibly hard for district to cut. In fact, one of our requirements, if we basically help a school establish CS, is going to be to distribute our marketing materials to both the students and the parents. And if after that it does get cut, then we didn't do a good enough job with our materials or establishing it. But I'm quite confident that this is a topic that on its merits alone will be very popular. So I think this is going to be, I'm very confident that once we see enrollment numbers for AP this year, we'll see a major jump relative to past years. And I think we're already at the point where CS is going to be, it already is the fastest growing AP course, but I think it's on its way to sort of catch up to the other sciences and maybe even calculus, but it's going to be much bigger and harder to drop as it gets established. One last question, because we're out of time.
I was thinking that where I live, I'm a former engineer, and I've had people approach me who are also former engineers, who just retired people who, they come to the school and talk to class, and I'm sure we do that. How would you go maybe try to collect those people, to try to get word? I mean, I can talk to the people I know, but how would you contact that?
Yeah, this is a great question. I would love feedback on this. The question is, can retired engineers or other engineers help in a school? I said it earlier, we literally have emails and zip codes of 25,000 software engineers who want to help. And we know which ones want to help 1 hour a week versus some are willing to work 5 hours a week to help in a local community. The touchy question is obviously some percentage of those are people that you wouldn't want near children. We don't know what percentage. I guarantee you that at least one of them is somebody you wouldn't want near children, and we can't vet all of them ourselves. So what at least our first thought to do is to basically help for any teacher see a list of here's people near you and help them maybe create a profile that a teacher can look at and say, oh, these are 6 people near me who if I reach out to them, might come to my classroom and give a guest lecture or whatnot, and leave that process on the school and the teacher to vet rather than on us, just because there's absolutely no scalable way to vet 25,000 people. But simply that kind of effective location-based matchmaking where you could see, oh, this person works at Boeing or whatever company they work at, and here's a link to their LinkedIn profile and so on, and then it's up to you to do either the criminal background check or whatever your school requires, and hopefully meet with them before they show up in the classroom. We want to do something along those lines. I'm sure we'll get a lot more volunteers around the CS Ed Week thing as well, which will only grow that database. So, yeah.
Just to add to what we were just talking about with the engineers or volunteers, why not set something on the idea of junior achievement? You create curriculum, and then we have to do voluntary to because I don't want a lot of engineers on this country. They're scary, they don't know how to talk about it, they do how to and so we certain engineers basically know that I feel that would
So these are two separate things. You were saying you don't want an engineer talking to seventh graders. Our general view is we want to make the software engineer volunteer people available to teachers, and you decide both whether it makes sense for you or whatnot. Sure. Well, maybe we could talk about it right after the session. All right. Well, thank you all, and have a great rest of the conference.